Now we will continue with the story.
Okay, so shall we get into the story then?
Yes, sir.
The story begins in Ayodhya, the greatest and the grandest city of the world at that time. Prithivyam tam anuttamam. So Ayodhya is situated on the banks of Sarayu River in what is now northern India. At that time, it was on the southern banks of the river, and Maharshi Valmiki gives a detailed description of this city. It was a beautiful city, well laid out streets. A royal Rajmarg went right through the city. It was sprinkled with water daily. It was covered with flowers. The mansions were beautifully constructed in a well organized manner. And these were large, multi storied mansions studded with diamonds and gems. It was a very prosperous city. There were areas for different markets. And he also uses some interesting adjectives for Ayodhya. He says, for example, that the water was so clean that it was like drinking sugarcane juice. Ikshukandara clean city. Also, another interesting adjective is Grihair Vichitrair Upashobhitam, that there were some buildings of interesting design or eclectic architecture. Even today, the greatest cities of the world push the envelope on design and architecture, right? Ayodhya was the great city of that time. It was ruled by King Dashrath, who was in the Ikshwaku dynasty. Dashrath was a visionary, powerful king and also loved by his people. Interestingly, Valmiki also mentions that he was a scholar, a Rajarshihi, so a scholar king. And he was supported by his advisors and ministers and government officials, advisors like Guru Vasishtha. The government officials of that time, Valmiki describes them, they were also well educated, capable, and fair. They yatha vachanakarinah, they would do as they said they promised. They provided service with a smile, smitapurva vibhashina. And interestingly, if the time came, they would not hesitate from punishing even their own children. Praptakalam tute dandam dharayeyu suteshwapi. So such were the government officials. And about the people, Valmiki says they were happy, healthy, contented, truthful. They were also righteous. And many of these things, Valmiki says, sarve narashcha naryascha, men and women were like this. There were some theatre groups in the city that were comprised entirely of women. And Valmiki says about the citizens, there was no one who was not well educated. There was no one who was not wealthy. There was no one who was not wearing good clothes. Now, these are interesting descriptions because many times we think that in the past, knowledge was perhaps restricted to only a certain section of the society. But here you see, the king was a scholar king, the government officials were educated, and so were all the citizens. Also, about wealth, we think that perhaps the kings, if they were wealthy, their wealth was based on exploitation. But here, the Ikshwakus ruled in a way that the economy flourished. There was wealth creation and also wealth distribution. And of course, the king was wealthy too. So, such was the Dashrath's land. Everything was good for him, working out well for him. Everything except one thing. He did not have an heir. He did not have a child. Dashrath had 3 wives, Kausalya the eldest, Sumitra and Kaikeyi. But he was childless. And so he discussed with his ministers and they all decided that they should do the Ashwamedh and the Putra Kameshti Yagyas in order to have children. Now, we spoke about this last time, loss of technology over time. So you may wonder, what is this Yagya and how does it help having children? And whether it is the Vimana technology that is lost over time, and we spoke about the mantra and the Yagya technology as well. So I'll tell you what is described, but that technology is lost. We can't recreate it today. But essentially, they did some process which perhaps created a a herbal, some remedy which aided conception. But I'll tell you how the yagya was done. They also said that the best person to do this was one called Rishyashringa Muni, a sage called Rishyashringa. There was a kingdom east of Ayodhya. So we are in northern India. East of Ayodhya, a kingdom called Angadesh. And the king's daughter was Shanta. And Shanta's husband was Rishyashringa Muni. By the way, in some retellings, Shanta is considered, it is told that she was Dashrath's daughter, who was adopted by the king there, but not according to Valmiki Ramayana. So we are discussing Valmiki Ramayana. Dashrath invited Shanta and Rishyashringa Muni to come and do the yagya. So the Muni came, and a horse was released together with some soldiers. And then the preparations for this yagya started. Now, a mini city was constructed on the northern banks of Sarayu. The city, Ayodhya, was on the southern banks. So think of this like a business expo or exhibition, or even what we would create for Kumbh Mela, right? Something to house hundreds and thousands of people, because these were the guests from all different lands who came here. And in terms of activities, there were two sets. The central part is, think of it as a laboratory where you do certain process which actually helps with the conception. And in the other areas of the yagya, there were debates, discussions, music, dance, entertainment, and so on.
When you're growing up in our country, you understand yagya as an elaborate prayer ritual.
Yes, an elaborate process done over fire, right? That's the impression we have. And here too, the core area, Maharishi Valmiki says that there were specific ingredients which were added in a specific order and duration over the fire. And then he says a being arose from the fire and gave a bowl of payasam or porridge, kheer, to Dashrath and said that give these to your wives and they will bear children. Now, we said that this is itihas, that is how it happened. And you may be wondering, how can a being arise from the fire? So, the way itihas is described is, it is what happened in the past but told in story format. Purva Vrittam, as it happened, but Kathayuktam, told in story format, that is itihas. So, over the fire, in this laboratory, they were adding ingredients, and then over time, the process created this outcome. In a way, the fire created this outcome. Now, poetically, you can personify the fire and say, a being arose from the fire and gave this payasam. But essentially, that's the outcome of this process, that this payasam was created, and Dashrath went and gave it to his wives.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's carry on.
Right. So, the yagya was over. Dashrath gave the payasam, the porridge, to his wives. And Rishyashringa Muni went back. After 12 months, the yagya worked. So, on the 9th day of the month of Chaitra, Ram Navami, Kausalya gave birth to Sri Ram.
Was she the eldest?
She was the eldest, yes. Okay. And the firstborn was Ram, Sri Ram, on Ram Navami. And soon afterwards, Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharat. So he was second. And then Lakshman and Shatrughna. So 4 sons were born to Dashrath.
To 3 wives.
Yes.
So Kaushalya Ma gave birth to Sri Ram.
Yes. Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharat. And Sumitra gave birth to Lakshman and Shatrughna.
Okay. And usually when you're growing up in India, you associate Lakshman with Sri Ram and Shatrughna with Bharat.
Yes, you've correctly pointed that out, because Maharishi Valmiki also says that when they were growing up, all 4 brothers, there was no issue between them. They were close. But Lakshman and Ram were so close, it was as though Ram's life force, prana, was outside, and that was Lakshman. And Bharat and Shatrughna were very close.
Got it.
But about their childhood, very little, we know very little about it. He has described it in only 12 verses, 12 shlokas out of 24,000. So that's less than a page, less than 0.05% of the entire book. of the first 16 years of Ram's life.
Got it. At the start of the story, we mentioned about Avatar,
Yes.
which is God descending down to earth in human form. Now, the thing with avatars is that in Sanatan Dharma, there's some avatars that are completely aware that they are God in human form. And as you're growing up in India, what they say about Sri Ram is that he was not completely aware that he was God in human form. People around him understood that he was a piece of divinity, but perhaps because of his own humility, he didn't look at himself as an ansh or a part of God. He just lived life as a righteous human.
Yes. And so he never proclaimed that he was born as Vishnu. Nor in the Valmiki Ramayana do we find extraordinary actions. Not extraordinary, but what we call Leela, right? That we normally associate with divine incarnations. But I would think the exemplary behavior is extraordinary and a reflection of the divine.
Got it. Okay.
So the the four sons were born. And although we know very little, what Valmiki has described is that he calls it Sarve Veda Vida Shurah Sarve Lokahite Ratah. So they were sure, they were brave. Of course, they were trained in warfare, in archery, Dhanur Vidya. As princes, they would be expected to lead armies. But again, they were also taught the Vedas. They were steeped in the learning of the Vedas. Sarve Veda Vida Shurah.
You'll have to give us context on what the Vedas are.
Vedas is the ancient body of knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, the West knows about the Bhagavad Gita because it's spoken about on Western podcasts and in Western media. They say that there are 4 Vedas.
Yes.
And the essence of the Vedas is encapsulated into the Bhagavad Gita. But when you actually open up the Vedas, they're very elaborate in terms of the quantum of information. There's everything from music to mysticism, to the nature of reality, to even Ayurveda, to astrology, any kind of science that assists human beings.
The body of knowledge is Veda. Yeah. Again, as princes, it is not only warfare that they were taught, but also all of this knowledge. And the purpose of all this training, whether it's knowledge or archery, was Sarve Lokahite Ratah. Lokahit means welfare of the people. They were steeped, they were dedicated to the welfare of the people. We'll see this again and again. It is not ruling over people, but serving the people, looking after their welfare, right? So that is how the 4 children were brought up.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's clip, make sure you check out all the other clips we've uploaded on this channel. You'll find a clip related to almost every single topic as long as you're willing to search for it.